I didn't know my life was already ending the day my husband called me selfish. We were standing in our kitchen, the late afternoon light slanting across the counters, dust floating in the air like it always did at that hour. Piper's shoes were by the door, one missing its pair. A half-empty grocery bag sat on the floor where I'd dropped it after work. I had just asked a simple question. Where are my pots? Devin didn't even look up from his laptop. I donated them, he said casually, like he was telling me he'd taken out the trash. For a second, my brain didn't process the words. My body did before my mind caught up. My chest tightened. My fingers went cold around the grocery receipt I was still holding. You what? I asked. He sighed, annoyed, finally glancing at me as if I were interrupting something important. Sloan needed kitchen items. A family lost their apartment in a fire. You already had pots. You're being selfish. Selfish. That word landed harder than anything else he'd ever said to me in 8 years of marriage. Because those weren't just any pots. They were the first thing I'd bought for myself in years. $600. Saved slowly, quietly, from my own salary, chosen carefully, used for exactly 3 weeks. And now they were gone. Given away without a conversation, without permission, without even the courtesy of a warning. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I nodded. And that was the moment my marriage actually ended. Even though it would take months, lawyers, courtrooms, and revelations I never saw coming to make it official. What Devin didn't know then, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that by calling me selfish, by taking what wasn't his to give, he had started a chain reaction he would never be able to stop. Because while he thought he was teaching me a lesson about generosity, I was about to teach him what loss really felt like. And I was done begging for my own life back. My name is Maddie Harper, and I was 34 when I realized the most dangerous kind of control doesn't arrive with fists or shouting. It arrives with a smile, with good intentions, with a man who tells everyone he's generous, while quietly emptying your life one object at a time. I met Devin Harper when I was 25. It was one of those ordinary beginnings that feel harmless when you're standing inside them. I was an early career accountant then, new to a mid-sized firm, constantly afraid of making mistakes, constantly double-checking my work like my life depended on it. My days were spreadsheets, deadlines, coffee, and the strange relief of numbers that always added up if you were careful enough. Devin was the opposite of careful. He was charm, color, noise, a freelance graphic designer with paint stains on his jeans, and a way of talking that made everyone around him feel like the room had gotten brighter. He could turn a boring conversation into a story. He could make a cashier laugh, could make strangers lean closer. He wore confidence like it was natural. We met at a friend's birthday dinner, one of those crowded restaurant tables where you have to shout a little just to be heard. Devin sat across from me, and I remember the first thing he said wasn't even a line. It was a question. You're quiet, he said, tilting his head like he was studying a painting. Are you bored, or are you just listening? I laughed because it felt weirdly accurate. I'm just listening, I told him. Good, he said. Most people talk too much. That was the beginning. He texted me first. He planned dates. He left little notes in my purse, cheesy, dramatic, completely unnecessary, and somehow exactly what I'd never had before. For the first year, Devin made me feel chosen, and I think that mattered more to me than I admitted. My life had always been built around being responsible, being steady, being the one people could count on. Devin felt like a reward for all that effort, like someone had finally looked at my seriousness and decided it deserved softness. When he proposed 2 years later, it wasn't flashy. No crowd, no restaurant stage performance. Just the two of us in our tiny apartment, sitting on the floor with takeout containers between us. He pulled out the ring, simple, tasteful, something he'd clearly picked with me in mind, and his hands were shaking just enough that my heart went tight. Marry me, he said, voice rough, like he was scared I'd say no. I said yes. Of course I did. The early years of our marriage weren't perfect, but they were believable. We both worked. We talked about the future in practical ways. We said things like budget and savings and maybe a house someday. Devin's freelance work was flexible. Mine wasn't. I had structure. He had freedom. I told myself we balanced each other. When I got pregnant with Piper, Devin cried. He pressed his forehead to my belly like he was praying. He promised, out loud, passionately, that he would be the kind of father who showed up. And when Piper was born, I believed him again. Piper is 5 now, bright, sensitive, the kind of child who notices everything. She has Devin's eyes and my stubbornness. She likes drawing animals and lining up her stuffed toys like they're having a meeting. Back then, Devin loved being a dad in the ways that were easy. He loved the photos, the silly voices, the look at us moments. But the invisible work, the exhausting, repetitive, daily tasks, always drifted back toward me like gravity. I handled most of the grocery shopping and meal planning because if I didn't, we'd somehow end up with 3 bags of chips and no actual food. Devin said he managed the household organization, which mostly meant he bought storage bins and labeled them. Like that was the same thing as doing the work of keeping a home running. Financially, we told everyone we split things equally. On paper, it looked fair. Mortgage portion, bills, shared accounts. But I was the one who remembered, the one who tracked, the one who caught the overdraft before it happened, the one who knew exactly how much we had left until payday. That's not because Devin couldn't do it. It's because he didn't want to. Devin's family loved him for that. They called him creative. They called him free-spirited. They called him the good one. His parents, Linda and Robert Harper, were the kind of people who smiled politely while judging everything. They loved appearances. They loved the story of Devin, the talented son, the generous heart, the artist who didn't care about money. And then there was Devin's younger sister, Sloane Harper, who ran a small charity in town. Sloane was 29, energetic, always busy, always posting photos of donation drives and smiling families holding boxes of food. People adored her. The community called her a saint. I told myself she meant well. I told myself it was good work. I even donated. I volunteered a few times early on, sorting clothes, organizing canned goods, smiling for group photos that Sloane posted online with captions about compassion and community. And if you'd asked me then, I would have said I was proud to be related to someone like her. What I didn't understand yet was that Sloane's charity wasn't just a place where things went. It was a stage, a place where Devin could perform goodness, where he could be praised for generosity that didn't actually cost him anything. Not at first, anyway. Because 3 years ago, Devin started what he called his minimalism kick. He said our house was too cluttered, too heavy, too much stuff. He talked like he'd discovered some life-changing philosophy, like getting rid of objects would somehow make us spiritually lighter. At first, it was harmless. Old books we never read, duplicate kitchen gadgets, things that truly didn't matter. I didn't argue. I even felt relieved watching cabinets clear out. I remember thinking, maybe this will be good for us. That's what I thought, right up until the day I came home from work, reached for my favorite coffee mug, and realized something small but unsettling. It wasn't there. And Devin looked me dead in the face and lied like it was nothing. That was the first crack. And once it appeared, everything else followed. At first, I told myself it was nothing. A chipped mug, a towel set, a lamp. Objects are easy to dismiss when you don't yet understand what they represent. When my coffee mug disappeared, I searched the dishwasher, the sink, even the back of the cabinet like it might magically reappear if I looked hard enough. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't unique. It was just mine. The same mug I'd held every morning for years, fingers automatically finding the small curve in the handle without looking. When I asked Devin about it, he barely paused. It was chipped, he said. I threw it out. Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Later that night, when he was in the shower, I checked the trash. It wasn't there. I didn't confront him right away. I told myself I was overthinking. But a few days later, during a family dinner at Sloane's place, I saw it sitting on a folding table near her donation bins. Clean. Intact. Familiar. My mug. I stared at it longer than I should have. Devin noticed. Oh, he said lightly, following my gaze. Yeah, I gave that to Sloane. Someone will appreciate it more than we did. Then I did. That distinction mattered, even then. I remember forcing a smile, heat creeping up my neck, while everyone else nodded approvingly. Sloane thanked Devin publicly, talking about waste reduction and mindful living. No one asked me. No one noticed that my hands had curled into fists at my sides. On the drive home, I said quietly, "Next time, can you ask before giving my things away?" Devin laughed, actually laughed. "It's a mug, Maddie. You're being ridiculous." That word again, in a different form. Ridiculous. I let it go because I didn't want to be the wife who made a scene over kitchenware. I didn't want to sound petty. I didn't want to be the woman who didn't support charity. So I swallowed it. Then the towels disappeared. A matching set I'd bought after Piper was born because I wanted something in our bathroom that felt new, that wasn't stained with exhaustion and sleepless nights. Devin said we had too many towels. I reminded him that those were the ones I used after work, the soft ones that actually dried your skin instead of scratching it. They were barely used, he said. Someone else needs them more. Then it was the hairdryer in the guest bathroom. Then the desk lamp from my home office. Each time, the conversation followed the same script. I would ask, he would dismiss. I would doubt myself. You're too attached to things. You don't even notice half of what we own. You're acting materialistic. And every time the argument ended the same way, with me backing down, because arguing felt worse than losing another object. The first time I felt something truly break was when my grandmother's coat disappeared. My grandmother died when I was in college. She wasn't flashy or loud. She loved quiet mornings and crossword puzzles. She wore the same pearl earrings every Sunday and smelled faintly of lavender soap. When she passed, there wasn't much left, just a few pieces she'd chosen carefully over her lifetime. The winter coat was one of them. Wool, silk lining, heavy in a way that felt protective. It fit me perfectly, like it had been waiting for me. Every winter, when I put it on, I felt like she was still with me, hands smoothing the collar, voice reminding me to zip it all the way up. The day I reached into the closet and it wasn't there, I panicked. I searched everywhere, the hallway closet, the storage bins, the coat rack. I even checked the car. Nothing. When I asked Devin, his reaction wasn't confusion. It was irritation. You barely wear it anymore, he snapped. It was just sitting there. My heart dropped into my stomach. What did you do with it? I asked. He hesitated, just long enough to tell me everything. I gave it to Sloane. The room felt suddenly too small. That coat was my grandmother's, I said slowly. Like if I spoke too fast, I might shatter. You didn't have the right. She would have wanted someone to actually use it, he interrupted, not hoard it out of sentimentality. I stared at him. She already gave it to someone, I said. She gave it to me. Devin rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. It's just a coat. Just a coat. Something inside me went quiet after that. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I walked into our bedroom, closed the door, and didn't speak to him for 3 days. He apologized eventually, but it was the kind of apology that came wrapped in explanation. I'm sorry you're upset, he said, but you have to understand. I was just trying to do the right thing. He promised he would ask next time. I wanted to believe him. So I did. For a few months, nothing disappeared. I thought maybe we'd moved past it. Then Piper's things started going missing. And that was when I stopped pretending this was about clutter at all. The weekend Devin decided to declutter Piper's room. She wasn't even home. She was staying with my parents, 2 nights of cartoons, pancakes, and the kind of attention grandparents give when they're trying to make up for the chaos of adult life. I remember kissing her forehead Friday night, promising I'd pick her up Sunday afternoon. When I came home from work that Friday, Devin mentioned casually that he was organizing a few things. I didn't think much of it. That was my mistake. Sunday afternoon, Piper ran down the hallway the moment we walked through the door. She dropped her backpack, kicked off her shoes, and went straight to her bedroom like she always did, like she needed to check that her world was still intact. The scream came seconds later. It wasn't loud. It was worse than that. It was thin, cracked, confused. I ran down the hall and found her sitting on her bed, small hands clutching the blanket, eyes darting around the room like something dangerous was hiding there. Mommy, she whispered, voice breaking. Where's Teddy? Teddy was the stuffed bear she slept with every night, the one she'd had since she was 2, the one she pressed against her chest when she was sick or scared or just needed something familiar in the dark. I scanned the room. Half the stuffed animals were gone. Not all, just some. The ones I had given her, her birthday bear, the soft rabbit from the bookstore, the handmade doll I'd found at a local market. I felt my blood turn cold. Where are my toys? Piper asked, tears spilling over. Did I do something bad? No, I said immediately, kneeling in front of her, pulling her into my arms. No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Devin appeared in this doorway, arms crossed, expression tight like he was the one being inconvenienced. She's too old for that many toys, he said. She needs to learn to let go. She was 4. She cried for an hour, I said later, once Piper had finally fallen asleep with one remaining stuffed animal clutched in her arms. She didn't understand why you took her things. Devin shrugged. Kids need to learn these lessons early. Something in his tone, flat, self-righteous, made my hands shake. That night, after Devin went to bed, I sat on the floor of Piper's room and looked around carefully. And that's when I saw it. The pattern. Every single toy that was gone was something I had bought. The expensive dollhouse Devin had proudly purchased? Still there. The kid's tablet he liked showing off to his family? Untouched. But the things chosen quietly, lovingly, thoughtfully by me? Gone. The realization settled into my chest like a stone. Over the next week, I went through the house, not physically searching, just noticing. I made a list in my head. My coffee mug, my towels, my lamp, my grandmother's coat, Piper's teddy bear, the kitchen utensils from our wedding registry that my family had gifted us, the mixing bowls my mother had given me. Not one thing Devin had personally bought was missing. Not one. His vintage band posters still covered the garage walls. His gaming equipment filled an entire corner of the living room. His closet overflowed with clothes he never wore. Yet somehow my belongings were always the excess. I didn't confront him. I didn't argue. I started paying attention. I took photos. I made notes. And over the next 6 months, the disappearances continued. A jewelry box from my aunt, photo frames, brand new kitchen towels. Every time the same excuse. We don't need it. Someone else could use it. You're being unreasonable. Then came the final straw. The thing that made everything click into place so clearly, it was almost calm. 4 months ago, after years of using scratched, warped cookware, I finally bought myself a professional grade set. $600. Saved deliberately. Researched carefully. Chosen by me. I used them for 3 weeks. On a Tuesday night, I came home, went to start dinner, opened the cabinet, and it was empty. Completely empty. The old scratched pot sat there like a joke. I walked into the living room where Devin was working on his laptop. Where are my pots? I asked. I dropped them off at Sloan's charity, he said without looking up. Someone lost their apartment in a fire. Why didn't you ask me? I said. I didn't think I needed to, he replied. We already had cookware. My cookware, I said. That I bought, with my money. That's when he finally looked at me and called me selfish. That was the moment something inside me shifted from hurt to clarity. I didn't argue. I cooked dinner in the old pans. I fed Piper. I put her to bed. And while Devin thought the conversation was over, I had already started planning the end. That night, after Piper was asleep and the dishes were done, I stood alone in the kitchen longer than necessary. The house was quiet in that artificial way it always was after a fight Devin didn't consider a fight. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint clicking of his keyboard in the living room, the sense that something had happened, but only on my side of the wall. I stared at the cabinet where my cookware used to be. $600. 3 weeks. Gone. And yet what hurt wasn't the money. It was the certainty in Devin's voice when he called me selfish, as if he had already decided who I was and my job was simply to accept it. I didn't cry. That surprised me. Instead, I felt focused. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and packed Piper's lunch like I always did. Devin barely looked at me. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't even seem aware that anything had changed. That told me more than any argument ever could. After work that day, I didn't go straight home. I drove to the storage unit we'd been renting for years, the one Devin claimed he could never remember the code for. The place smelled like dust and metal, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Seasonal decorations lined the walls. Old furniture sat under plastic sheets. And then there were Devin's boxes. So many boxes. Old college textbooks. Cords for electronics we no longer owned. 3 broken printers he insisted he would fix someday. Clothes from high school that hadn't fit him in over a decade. Minimalism, apparently, had limits. I didn't touch anything that first day. I took photos. I made lists. I went home and acted like everything was normal. For the next week, I watched Devin closely. I noticed how rarely he actually worked, how often his freelance sessions turned into gaming marathons, how he talked about contributing while doing very little of the invisible labor that kept our lives functioning. And then quietly, carefully, I started moving things. Not everything, not dramatically. One item every few days. An old gaming controller, a box of vintage comic books, a watch he rarely wore. I didn't donate them to Sloan's charity. I took them across town to places Devin would never think to look. 2 weeks later, he noticed. He tore the house apart looking for his watch. He accused me, flat out, of moving it. I met his anger with calm. I haven't seen it, I said. Maybe you misplaced it. The doubt in his eyes was immediate. The gaming controller disappeared next. Then his noise-canceling headphones. Devin grew anxious. He started checking his belongings the moment he came home. He locked his closet. He asked me over and over if I'd seen his things. And every time I said no. For the first time in years, Devin was living inside the uncertainty I'd been drowning in. And he hated it. He stopped leaving the house. He hovered. He guarded. I let it go on for another week. Then I took the gaming console. All of it. The system, the controllers, the games. Thousands of dollars worth of equipment he loved. I packed everything carefully, and I drove straight to Sloan's charity. Sloan looked genuinely surprised when she saw me. I'd never been the one to drop off donations before. That had always been Devin's role, his performance. So when I carried the boxes inside, her smile widened, warm and approving, like I'd finally joined the right side of the story. "Maddie, this is such a nice surprise," she said. I set the boxes down and lifted the flaps just enough for her to see inside. Her eyes went wide. "Oh, wow," she breathed. "Are you sure about this? This is expensive." "Yes," I said calmly. "Devin's been talking a lot about minimalism. He wanted these to go to kids who couldn't afford gaming systems." Her expression softened instantly. "That's so like him," she said. "He's always been the generous one." I nodded. Before I left, I asked for donation receipts. Official ones. Itemized. Sloan printed them right there. Charity name, tax ID, estimated values. I thanked her and walked out feeling strangely steady, like I'd already crossed a bridge there was no returning from. That evening, I waited until Devin was fully absorbed in his laptop. Headphones on, fingers moving, attention elsewhere. Then I opened our family group chat. Devin, me, Sloan, his parents, his older brother, Marcus. I posted photos of the receipts with a simple message. "So proud of Devin for his generous donation to Sloan's charity. This is going to help so many kids." The responses came instantly. Heart emojis from his mother. Praise from Marcus. A glowing message from Sloan about how her brother had always led with his heart. Devin's phone started buzzing. I watched his face change, color draining, then rushing back in a deep, angry red. He came into the kitchen, eyes wild. "What did you do?" he hissed. "I followed your example," I said, still washing dishes. "Isn't that what we do now?" He exploded. "That was my gaming equipment. You had no right." I turned to face him. "You gave away my cookware, my grandmother's coat, Piper's teddy bear, my belongings, without asking." "That's different," he snapped. "How?" I asked. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "I didn't need those things," he finally said weakly. "And you don't need a gaming console," I replied evenly. "Someone else could use it better. You said that, remember?" His hands were shaking. "I want my stuff back," he said. "Then call Sloan," I said. "Ask for it." He froze. He couldn't. Not after the praise. Not after the posts. Not after the story he'd built around himself. "That would make me look bad," he muttered. "That," I said softly, "is exactly the point." That night, Devin slept on the couch. The next morning, he looked wrecked. Dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed, posture collapsed like the air had gone out of him. "We need to talk," he said. I poured coffee and sat across from him. He talked for a long time, about how hard he worked, how his hobbies were his way to relax, how I'd embarrassed him, how I'd betrayed his trust. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I asked one question. "When was the last time you paid for anything in this house besides your own hobbies?" Silence. I opened my phone and showed him the spreadsheet. 8 years of records, groceries, utilities, Piper's expenses, medical bills, repairs, insurance, school activities. All mine. Devin tried to argue that he contributed by being home. I showed him Piper's school records, doctor visits, activity schedules. Not one pickup, not one appointment, not one conference. Then I asked him to show me his recent client invoices. He couldn't, because the truth was ugly. Devin hadn't had steady work in over a year. While I worked overtime, he gamed. Something in him snapped. He stood up, yelling about being unappreciated, invisible, exhausted. Then he said it. "If you're so unhappy, maybe we should just get divorced." I didn't hesitate. "Okay," I said. The room went silent. He stared at me like he'd misheard. "I already contacted a lawyer," I continued calmly. 2 weeks ago. I've been documenting everything. Piper and I are moving out at the end of the month." Devin sat down slowly. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected tears, begging, forgiveness. What he got instead was finality. The lowest point didn't come with screaming. It came later. After the words were said, after the future I'd been holding together with routine and denial finally collapsed under its own weight. 2 weeks after that conversation, Piper and I moved out. I packed her clothes first, then her books, then her remaining stuffed animals, carefully, one by one, making sure nothing was left behind that could disappear while my back was turned. She didn't ask many questions. Children don't always need explanations. They just need safety. Our new apartment was small but clean. 2 bedrooms, beige walls, quiet neighbors. The kind of place that smelled faintly of fresh paint and new beginnings. Piper helped me choose the colors for her room. She held paint swatches like they were treasure. That first weekend, we ate pizza on the floor and laughed when the box slid out from under us. And yet, at night, when Piper was asleep and the apartment was silent, I sat alone on the edge of my bed and felt the weight of everything I had just done. 8 years, a marriage, a man I thought I knew. There was grief in that quiet, not loud, not dramatic, but heavy, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes you wonder if you missed something obvious, if you should have seen the signs earlier, if leaving made you heartless. Devin didn't handle the separation well. At first, it was calls, texts, long messages about how we needed to talk, how he could change, how he'd made mistakes. I told him all communication would go through my lawyer. Then he showed up at my office. Twice. Security escorted him out both times. A few days later, he waited in the parking lot at Piper's school. Just stood there, watching. My skin crawled. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone, Piper asleep down the hall, and realized something chilling. Devin wasn't sad. He was losing control. Flowers started arriving at my office, cards with long, handwritten apologies. Gifts for Piper sent through my parents because he knew I wouldn't accept them. My mother called me. He seems genuinely remorseful, she said gently. Maybe you should consider giving him another chance. I asked her one question. Do you remember the coat? Silence. That coat had been her mother's, the last thing they'd picked out together. I'm done forgiving, I said quietly. She didn't argue again. Then Devin started showing up in places he knew I'd be. The grocery store near our apartment, the coffee shop where I worked on weekends, Piper's dance class. He never approached. He just watched. I went back to my lawyer. We filed for a restraining order. The judge granted it immediately, after reviewing the text, the flowers, the documented appearances at my workplace and Piper's school. Devin was ordered to stay 500 feet away from me, my daughter, my job, and her school. That night I cried for the first time, not because I missed him, but because I finally accepted what I had been living with. Fear doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it creeps in disguised as persistence, as love. And the moment I understood that was the moment I stopped feeling weak and started feeling angry in a way that sharpened instead of shattered me. I thought that was the bottom. I was wrong, because what came next would show me just how much of my life had been built on lies. The call from my lawyer came on a Wednesday afternoon. Her voice was calm, professional, but there was an edge to it I'd never heard before. Maddie, she said, we need to meet in person. I left work early and drove straight to her office, my stomach tight the entire way. Piper was at my parents' house for the night, which felt strangely fitting. I wasn't sure I could have held myself together in front of her if whatever was coming hit the way I sensed it would. When I walked into my lawyer's office, there was a thick stack of papers waiting on her desk. She didn't ask me to sit. She asked me one question. Did you know your husband has a trust fund? I actually laughed. A short, disbelieving sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. No, I said, that's not possible. She slid the documents toward me. Devin's name, dates, account numbers. A trust fund established by his grandparents. Matured when he turned 25. Current value, approximately $800,000. The room went quiet. I stared at the papers, my mind scrambling to catch up with reality. $800,000. The entire time I worked overtime, the years I skipped lunches, the nights I lay awake calculating expenses, panicking over unexpected bills. Devin had been sitting on nearly $1 million, and he never told me. My lawyer kept talking, her voice steady, almost gentle. In addition to the trust fund, Devin owns 2 rental properties. They're in another state. His parents manage them. The rental income averages about $3,000 a month. I felt something drain out of me, not sadness, not shock. Illusion. Does he have access to that money? I asked. She nodded. He's had full access for over a decade. I went home that night and sat in the dark. No TV, no music. Just the hum of the apartment and my own breathing. Devin could have paid off our mortgage. He could have contributed equally. He could have hired help, taken pressure off me, made our life easier. Instead, he let me struggle. And worse, he stole my belongings, my memories, my daughter's comfort, and gave them away to make himself look generous. The next day, my lawyer called again. She dug deeper. The rental income had been flowing steadily into an account Devin controlled for 6 years. Hidden, undisclosed. That's financial deception, she said plainly. And it matters. I told her I wanted everything I was legally entitled to. No mercy. 2 days later, something else happened. I received a message request on social media from a woman I didn't know. Her name was Jennifer. Her message was short. I need to talk to you about Devin. I almost deleted it. But something stopped me. We met at a coffee shop near my office. Jennifer was around my age, polite, nervous. She didn't waste time. She placed her phone on the table and asked me a strange question. Did Devin ever give you expensive gifts? I shook my head. She nodded slowly, like she already knew the answer. Then she showed me the photos. My grandmother's coat, a necklace I thought I'd lost, picture frames from my apartment, all sitting inside her home, dated, documented. Jennifer told me she'd been seeing Devin for almost 2 years. He told her we were separated. He told her I was vindictive. He told her he wanted to take care of her. And he'd been doing it, using my belongings and sending her over $40,000 in rent, utilities, groceries. Money from accounts I didn't even know existed. Jennifer slid her phone closer. "I'll testify," she said quietly, "if you need me to." That was the moment something inside me locked into place. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was acting. Everything unraveled faster after that. Once Jennifer's evidence entered the case, the tone changed immediately. My lawyer didn't raise her voice or make dramatic threats. She didn't need to. She simply added facts to the record. Bank transfers, dates, amounts, photos of stolen property, messages discussing gifts and money, financial infidelity, hidden assets, theft of personal property. Devin's lawyer contacted mine within 48 hours. They wanted to resolve things quickly. The first offer was insulting. $20,000, full custody of Piper, in exchange for me waiving any claim to Devin's assets. My lawyer laughed when she told me. Then she sent our counteroffer. 50% of all marital assets, including undisclosed rental income, child support based on actual income, legal fees covered. Devin's lawyer called it outrageous. My lawyer responded with 8 years of spreadsheets, every bill I paid, every expense I carried, while Devin contributed the bare minimum. Then she added the trust fund documentation. The line went quiet. A week later, Devin's lawyer requested an in-person meeting. Devin wouldn't look at me when we sat across from each other in that conference room. His shoulders were slumped. The confidence he used to wear like armor was gone. His lawyer spoke first. They offered 40% of assets, child support based on rental income only, a formal apology. "No," my lawyer said calmly. We countered with 60%, full child support based on all income sources, and reimbursement for every stolen item. The negotiation dragged on for hours. Finally, Devin spoke. He said he'd wanted to build something on his own. He said the trust fund made him feel small. He said Jennifer was a mistake. I looked at him for the first time. "You had $800,000, I said, "and you watched me struggle." He started crying. Real tears. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'll do anything." I slid the settlement agreement across the table. "Sign this." He looked at his lawyer. His lawyer nodded. Devin signed. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. The house went up for sale. The proceeds were split according to the agreement. Child support was recalculated, this time based on reality. I was reimbursed for everything he stole. Piper and I moved again, this time into a small house with a yard. She chose her room. She picked the paint color. She helped unpack every box. Devin's family stopped contacting me. Sloan sent one final message saying I'd destroyed a good man. I blocked her. Devin's mother tried to control visitation on her terms. When I refused, she went silent. Devin moved in with his brother. 3 weeks later, his brother asked him to leave. His parents tried next. That didn't last either. He eventually rented his own apartment, using trust fund money. Jennifer contacted me once more. She told me she'd donated everything Devin gave her to a different charity. She didn't want any reminder of what he'd done. I appreciated that more than she knew. Piper adjusted in ways that broke and healed my heart at the same time. After visits with her father, she'd come home and quietly check her room, making sure her things were still there. Then she'd relax. One night, she asked if we could get a dog. Then she hesitated. "Daddy can't give it away, right?" I told her the truth. "No one can take anything from our home without permission." We went to the animal shelter the next weekend. And for the first time in years, I felt something like peace. The quiet in my house doesn't echo. It settles. That was the first thing I noticed once everything was finally over. After the paperwork, after the signatures, after the last forced conversations were reduced to messages inside a court-mandated parenting app. Quiet used to make me anxious. It used to feel like something was about to go wrong. Now it feels like safety. Piper and I stayed in the new house. 3 bedrooms, a small yard that gets good sunlight in the afternoon. Nothing extravagant, just solid, stable hours. She helped unpack every box, narrating where things should go, like she was restoring order to a world that had once felt unpredictable. I bought a new set of cookware, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I could. And this time, when I opened the cabinet, it stayed exactly the way I left it. Devin tried to talk to me once, about 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. I was picking Piper up after one of his weekends. He stood awkwardly in the doorway of his apartment, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. "I've been thinking," he said. Maybe someday we could be friendly for Piper. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. Our communication goes through the app, I said. If it's not about Piper, we don't need to talk. He nodded. I drove away without looking back. That night, Piper and I stopped for ice cream. She talked about school, about art club, about the dog we might adopt next month. She laughed easily, without scanning the room, without checking whether joy was allowed. Later, she taped a drawing to the refrigerator. It was our house, the two of us standing in front of it, and a dog beside us. I stood there longer than necessary, coffee cooling in my hands, and let the weight of that moment settle into my bones. For years, I thought strength meant endurance, staying, forgiving, letting things go. I was wrong. Strength is recognizing when something is being taken from you, slowly, quietly, and deciding that you are allowed to say enough. Strength is choosing peace over performance. Belongings can be replaced. Time cannot. And the lesson I wish I had learned sooner is this. Someone who repeatedly takes from you without asking isn't generous. They're rehearsing control. My home is quiet now. Not empty. Peaceful. And that is the difference.